SWEGTA!
Hey everybody, so today I thought we could talk about one of the most interesting and darkest fan theories surrounding Bully, specifically the ending. I made a video about this about 9 or 8 years ago, but I kinda skimmed over a lot of details, and since then there has been a lot of speculation surrounding some very strange little inconsistencies during the last few scenes of the game. In a nutshell, this fan theory speculates that Jimmy dies at the end of Bully. And by the way, just a quick heads up for anyone who's not familiar with Bully's storyline or don't want to have the game spoiled in case you haven't played it yet. Warning, spoily-ups, lots and lots of spoily-ups.
Spoilers alert! Spoilers alert! No f***ing Where the f*** do you think you are? Of course there's spoilers! It's a goddamn
Bully video. So during one of the final missions of the game, Complete Mayhem, you take out all the clique leaders and then find Gary inside the school's main building, waiting for Jimmy, ominously and as a cartoon villain almost. You confront Gary on top of the school, you chase him up all the way to the bell tower, there's a bit of a scuffle between Jimmy and Gary, they fall down onto this platform, and throughout the fight, the platform continues to break more and more until eventually both of them fall through the skylight down into the principal's office. Gary can be seen laying face down on the floor while Jimmy seems relatively fine. Yeah, he's a bit winded and probably in some level of pain, but he doesn't seem all too bothered about it. He unties Crabblesnitch, and Crabblesnitch then tells him to take out the trash, which some people have pointed out seems highly unrealistic, but given the school's very dog-eat-dog nature, and the fact that Crabblesnitch views bullying as something that builds character, I mean, I don't know, it seems to me like he doesn't have the greatest sense of empathy to begin with. I don't know, you could call it unprofessional or unbecoming of a principal to be that callous with regards to the well-being of a student. But at the same time, you know, he was kidnapped, like he was held hostage by Gary Smith. I don't think it's totally out of character for him, out of all people, to make a quick little take out the trash, would you Hopkins comment. So, Jimmy happily obliges, kicking Gary in the process. No comment from Crabblesnitch like, hey, whoa, don't do that. Jimmy drags Gary face down, and keep in mind, there's glass on the floor. He drags him out of the room, and Crabblesnitch begins praising him, saying, you're a diamond, boy.
A diamond.
Now, in response to this, Jimmy credits Pete and Zoe for helping him bring order to the school. I always found this pretty interesting because he never mentions Edgar. Now here's the thing, Edgar is a violent criminal, sure, but at the same time, I think you can sympathize with him a little bit considering that he came from a poor home, didn't have access to the same opportunities that most people in town do, including education, and so he ended up in Blue Skies, the most crime-ridden area in the entire town. And I think as an act of survival and self-preservation, he established himself as this badass who rules over a clique of dropouts. It kind of ties into the main theme of the game, which is canis canem edit, dog eat dog. In order to survive in this place, or at the very least not be a perpetual victim of other people's aggression, you have to climb the social pecking order by being aggressive towards other people, which is awful. You know, it'd be terrible if that was a thing in real life, right? But again, Jimmy never once mentions Edgar at all. And from this point on, the character simply disappears from the game. You can't find him in free roam, he doesn't appear in any side missions.
It's like Edgar never existed. Poof. Just poof. Gone. So sad.
Anyway, back on point. So following this, Jimmy asks Crabblesnitch about the letter that Crabblesnitch was gonna send to Jimmy's mom, informing her that Jimmy has been expelled and that she needs to go pick him up. And in response to this, Crabblesnitch puts his hands on Jimmy's shoulder and simply asks, what letter? Implying that the letter was never sent to begin with, or that he was planning on sending it. Up until Gary took over the school, he was saved by Jimmy, and now he's made up his mind that I misjudged you. You actually saved possibly my life, so forget about that letter, doesn't matter. People have criticized this as being unrealistic, but I feel like if somebody saved my life, the least that I could do in return is be like, okay, I'm not gonna tell your mom that you were up to some mischief. Now immediately following this cutscene, there's an interesting detail that you might have picked up on if you paid close attention. Zoe Taylor is immediately shown in her school uniform. Despite the fact that there has been no established fast forward in time or anything like that, this scene right here is implied to happen immediately following the previous cutscene. Not only that, but the riot happening at the school that you saw mere minutes ago, it's ceased. It's totally quiet now. The only people Jimmy can see are those celebrating his victory. Zoe and Jimmy kiss, roll the end credits, and then Chapter 6 begins. Now, there are a couple interesting details that I want to talk about. First off, Chapter 6 is the only chapter in the game in which the number is shown as a regular 6 and not a Roman numeral. Now, the second interesting thing is the name of the chapter being Endless Summer, implying that time has stopped moving. It's summer forever. So what is being posited as an explanation for all of this? As quite a few people in this community seem to believe, Jimmy died at the end of the game by falling through the skylight, and now he's kind of stuck inside his own mind in this purgatory. You know, in the mind of Jimmy Hopkins, the solution to the riot happening inside the school was to just head inside, beat a bunch of people up, and then that was it.
How are we gonna stop a load of kids from beating the crap out of each other?
It's America! We go in there with threats and bribes until we get what we want. If all else fails, we beat the crap out of everyone. That's why I brought along backup.
Russell likes to hurt people for peace.
And the way Crabblesnitch describes Jimmy as being rough around the edges, but still a diamond, it kinda sounds like how Jimmy would perceive himself, especially during the Chapter 5 phase, when his ego is totally out of control. And the way that everything just wraps up real nicely at the end without any real consequences for Jimmy or any of his friends, it just comes off highly unrealistic and almost imaginary. Nobody's fighting, everybody's celebrating Jimmy, Jimmy gets the girl, Crabblesnitch recognizes what an amazing person he is. Gary gets his comeuppance. He somehow gets unexpelled. I don't know exactly what the process of that would be like. And the letter that Crabblesnitch was gonna send to Jimmy's mom was just never sent to begin with. So, what do I make of all this? Because obviously you're watching this video to hear my opinion, right? I think it's an interesting theory, but I don't buy into it. If I'm gonna be blunt about it, I think that it comes down to bad writing. I'm a big fan of this game, there's no denying that, but as you progress, especially post Chapter 3, you'll pretty quickly notice how fast everything's getting storyline-wise. You know, Chapter 1 and 2 especially take their time and they establish a lot. And then 3 comes along and it's, you know, decent in duration, but Chapter 4 and 5, that's where things just get faster and faster. And then you reach the end of the game and it's like, oh yeah, everything worked out fine. The end. Roll credits. Endless summer. Yay! I don't dislike the ending, but I would say that it's not ideally written. Here's what I think happened. I think the people behind the game had way more planned for Chapter 4, 5, and 6. A lot of content, including missions from those chapters, ended up being cut. Crunch time was stressful for a lot of developers, to say the least, and I think this also affected the writing staff behind the game. I think they had to make a lot of modifications to the storyline to make it perfectly wrap up real fast and tight. Now, is it unrealistic for Crabblesnitch to be able to hear, even more so discern, what Gary and Jimmy are saying on top of the school all the way from his office? Yes. And again, I think this ties into the writing being rushed at the end of the game. You know, this sort of thing is not uncommon with games by Rockstar. GTA 5's ending ended up being rushed, and Red Dead Redemption 2 was gonna have another chapter that ended up being cut. I'm just gonna apply Occam's razor here and say, okay, you have two options. A, Jimmy died at the end of the game and now exists within a purgatory that I guess has never been established to exist in Bully or really any other game by Rockstar. Or B, it's a rushed game with kinda writing near the end. I'm gonna go with B, but if anybody watching this believes in A, let me know in the comments below why. I am curious to hear more about this because this is one of the most interesting video game fan theories that I've ever heard. I did also come across a comment on Reddit. Yes, I know, cringe, but yeah, I found a comment on Reddit that pointed out that Chapter 5 is named The Fall and Rise of Jimmy Hopkins, aged 15, which is really specific and further gives more strength to this theory, especially if you switch places of the words fall and rise to rise and fall. Now, the whole aged 15 thing I find interesting because no other chapter has that in the title. I don't know why that's there. If somebody can explain that in the comments, feel free. But as for switching the words, okay, well, yeah, I mean, if you change what it says, then it'll say something different. Like, I don't think that's a good argument. I'm sorry. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Purgatory theory. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. It helps me out tremendously. Please consider joining my Discord, link down below, 18+. And if you're interested in more creepy and dark content surrounding Bully, then you might want to check out this playlist. Anyway, that's it for this video. You folks, as always, stay classy. Peace. I want to give a thank you to my channel members for supporting what I do here on YouTube. Norway is just better, Cobham, Yoita, Yippee, The Synth Scream Collective, Golden Stripes, and Jake Johnson. If anyone watching this would like to have their name read at the end of my videos, just like this, then please consider becoming a channel member. Thank you, and have an awesome day. Peace.